What is going on, Diablo fans? Dobrunsky here, and today's video is another monthly Q&A. I love making these videos. You guys ask me some of the most interesting questions, everything from the future of Diablo 2 Resurrected to Diablo 4, just gaming content in general, so thank you so much for making this video series possible. And again, if you would like to have your question featured in next month's video, let me know in the comment section below of this video, because I will be grabbing the most interesting questions from today's video and then featuring it in next month's installment. But with that being said, before we jump into today's video, I just want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Hero Wars. Here is an interesting fact. There is many different and unique characters that you can choose from in Hero Wars. There's cyborgs, aliens, vampires, even furries won't be disappointed. My personal favorite is Chava. Find your favorite champion in Hero Wars today. So the first question is from Brian Paulson, and his question is, I want your opinion on what changes you would like to see on the top tier D2 uniques to make them actual contender versus some runewords. So a lot of TC87 uniques are actually useful, Griffins, Deathfathom, and D-Web, but I would like to see some of the ultra rare TC87s buffed up a little bit. So Tyrell's Might, Mansong's Lesson, Astrians, there's probably a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head, but I would like to see them buffed. For an example of a single change, because it's too much to talk about every single TC87, I would significantly improve Mansong's Lesson, maybe add a varying rule of 1 to 2 open sockets on the item naturally, sort of similar to Tomb Reaver, and then bump up the +5 to all skills up to +9. So there's a potential there to get more damage with 2 facets and +9 skills versus something like Obsession, and you also have the varying negative res rolls, but you'd have to sacrifice FHR on your standard Hodo Spirit setup. So would sort of have to make a decision between more damage and sacrificing FHR, or go with the safer setup using your standard Hodo and Spirit. But that's just one example off the top of my head. I think D2R needs some significant meta shifting changes to some of these uniques, because if you just add like 1 extra skill to Mansong's Lesson, it's still going to be dog shit. I mean, you look at Fathom. Fathom is amazing, right? They just need to sort of not pussyfoot around and make some serious changes to some of the TC87 uniques if they actually plan on buffing them in the future. So the next question is from Skull M. His question is, what do you think / predict about the future of D2R? Will the introduction of D4 affect D2R to go into maintenance mode, or will there be some new D2R content in the future? I would argue that D2R is already in maintenance mode based on what we've seen for patch 2.6. But to be fair, I didn't really expect to get all the updates that we've received so far. I mean, we have had some pretty substantial character balancing, the introduction of quick cast, terror zones, so the game is a lot better in my opinion than what it was at least when D2R first launched. Some people might have varying different opinions there, but I think that we have received quite a few substantial changes. But I would imagine in the future we'll just receive very small, minor updates like different rune words or unique items, sort of similar to patch 2.6. I don't think we'll see crazy new Uber events or whatnot, which, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Most of the focus is shifting to D4, so at least we're getting some changes to D2R. But yeah, I think it's currently in maintenance mode, at least that's my opinion. Next question is from FXX, whole bunch of different letters. Dobrunsky, do you think it's a good idea in future patches they buff some of the unique items like Grandfather, Tyro's Might, Doombringer, Bariza, Arcane's Valor, etc.? How, in your opinion, will this shift the meta? So this is sort of similar to the first question. Yes, I would like to see some of the ultra rare existing unique items buffed in order to sort of like shift the meta. You're not really gonna change anything other than maybe like the itemization meta for some characters, depending on how far you go with some of the changes. The only like meta shifting change that I could potentially see, for example, in patch 2.6 is if Mosaic actually receives that 50% chance to not use a charge, and we have dual wielding assassins teleporting around, constantly spamming Phoenix Strike and just AoE obliterating the area. That would sort of shift the meta in terms of, instead of everything being Trapsins, you might see like a hybrid of like 50% martial arts assassins and 50% Trapsins. Like that's sort of like a meta shifting change. Not really sure how you do that with uniques unless you add like substantial sort of like game breaking mechanics to each unique, but just adding like an aura on Grandfather like Fanaticism or something, that's not really gonna meta shift the characters that are used. It's gonna possibly shift the itemization of the characters. But I definitely would like to see in future patches some of the unique items addressed. Like if we get, you know, the 8 new rune words for patch 2.6 and then patch 2.7 is like another 8 new rune words and then patch 2.8 is another 8 new rune words, you're just making the existing problem worse of most unique items being garbage and everything being focused on rune words. So I definitely would like to see future patches address some of the uniques, or at least their balancing in terms of D2R itemization. Next question is from Saint Tyrael. Is there something you could think of apart from melee changes you are excited to see being changed in Diablo 2 Resurrected? Well, patch 2.6 honestly didn't really move the Rev Limiter at all. But in terms of what I would like to see change, I would like to see a heavy push in quality of life, mostly with a loot filter and currency tab. That's going to alleviate a lot of the muling headaches as well as loot clutter issues. And then in terms of other changes, I would like to see more significant meta shifting changes. So similar to Mosaic, but going further. So having that 25% jumped up to 50% so you could dual wield, so that martial arts assassins would be more viable, in particular Phoenix Strike assassins. I'd like to see more rumors kind of meta shift the characters that are people just choose to use. Like, that's really just what I would like to see. I think Diablo 2 Resurrected, at least for me, it's sort of getting a little bit stale. You can only run a Handmaiden so many times or Blizzard Sorcerer so many times. So it would be very interesting to see a whole introduction of like new plague characters, like a summon necro that's all mages and fire golems, or martial arts Phoenix Strike assassin, etc. I'd like to see more of that versus like the current stale meta of what people typically play in D2R. So the next question is from Nick and Caroline. The question is, do you think Diablo 2 streamers that don't convert to D4 will be suiciding their channel? This is a very interesting one. I think it depends on your size, because I would argue that there's a handful of Diablo 2 content creators that might suicide their channel just by switching to Diablo 4 because their viewer base pretty much only wants to watch Diablo 2. That's the biggest issue when you sort of focus in on a single game. It's very difficult to branch out from that. You'll typically notice like you might bleed subs or followers on Twitch or YouTube. You'll have lower viewership counts the second you sort of migrate to a different game. But I could see this going, like I said, both ways. People that are hardcore D2 that have only ever played D2 and haven't really branched out anywhere else, they might suicide their channel by switching. But I definitely think there's also the potential for people to not potentially grow along with Diablo 4 with all the new different, eyeballs that'll be on Diablo 4 when it launches. I do think that there's the potential for both. You could either grow with Diablo 4 or potentially lose by changing to Diablo 4. It's just very situational, but interesting question. But yeah, I think it could go either way, to be honest. It depends on the particular creator that you're talking about. Next question is from Ethereal Bias. Very interesting question. In your opinion, what is needed the most in the state of Diablo 2? I saw a poll by Riker, and it essentially stated about half of the D2 player base stopped playing since the game released. Do you think a stronger endgame and giving more purpose to characters who beat hell difficulty would strengthen player retention? How could they go about implementing something that the vast majority of players would agree on? So this, again, very interesting question. First thing I would point out is this poll from Riker. I would argue that Riker's audience is probably maybe like 10 to 15% hardcore dedicated D2 players. So I don't know if it's the most accurate poll, considering I would imagine it's probably the opposite. About 90% of the viewership on my channel is probably focused on Diablo 2 Resurrected. So the polling results would probably be different if I put out the exact same poll. With that being said, what do I think is most needed to retain the player base? I don't think it's realistic to just say add some big crazy endgame content, because I just put in Terror Zones and I largely think Diablo 2 Resurrected is in maintenance mode. So I would argue some significant changes that shift the meta in terms of itemization. So bumping up a lot of the very rare TC87 uniques and introducing some very desirable high-end powerful endgame rune birds. In addition to that, maybe shift the meta with some different skills, like having, again, a fire golem, skeleton mage, necro rip through the game. That would be a brand new build that you're only focusing on casting lower res, having Infinity Mercenary, Fire Golem, and then just skeleton mages. Or having Phoenix Strike Martial Arts Assassin not be garbage, or maybe make a Conversion Paladin not be garbage. Having brand new exciting characters along with brand new endgame uniques and rumors, I think would help retain the player base. But just kind of, again, like sort of pussyfooting around and introducing small minor changes is not going to incentivize people to come back and return to the game. So I think that the devs need to change realistically what's feasible, but they need to go hardcore, put the gas pedal to the floor, and make significant meta shifting changes. Next question is from Dead Parrot, but before we take a look at this question, we're going to segue to today's sponsor, Hero Wars. By the way, Hero Wars is a world with 6 unique modes and 100 million players. You can choose to play solo or with friends. Also make sure to try out Titans mode. Become a legend and play Hero Wars today. So Dead Parrot's question is, do you think that underutilized skills should be rebalanced in D2R before Blizzard shifts their focus to D4 full-time, and why is your answer yes? Well, like I already mentioned previously in this video, I already think that D2 is in maintenance mode and most of the focus is on Diablo 4. But fortunately, I think that rebalancing some underutilized skills could help retain the player base and introduce some new meta shifting builds. So for example, Skeleton Mage, Fire Golem, Necro combo, make it viable and strong alternative option. Phoenix Strike Assassin, make that viable and alternative option. Buff up Conversion on the Paladin, so you could run around with a crazy, like, imagine like a Necro army, but with a Paladin. You run around just slapping monsters, converting them, and then switching to Zeal. Making some simple changes to some of the underutilized skills would introduce new builds, meta shifting ideas, but would largely be a lot less work than introducing like a whole new endgame mechanic. So yes, I definitely think that some of the underutilized skills should be rebalanced, but I would argue that Diablo 4 is already the main focus of Blizzard currently. Next question is from Holy. Is the Necromancer Skeleton Mage Summoner the worst build in the game? Even worse than the Crossbow Barb? I think this depends on how you build your summon Necro. If you just have one hard point into Skeleton Mages and you're mostly relying on your Skeleton Warriors, Revives, Corpse Explosion, and a hard-hitting Mercenary, I think that Skeleton Mages work fine as a meat shield. If, however, you build your summon Necro around Fire Golem, lower res, and go all in on Skeleton Mages, yes, it's gonna be a bad build. Worst build of the game though? Probably not. I think maybe like Claws of Thunder or Phoenix Strike Assassin in its current state is probably worst build. There might be a couple others I can't think off the top of my head, but I think it depends on how you build your summon Necro. But it's definitely one of the worst builds. Is it the worst? Not entirely sure. Next question is from Jeffrey. Do you think Diablo 4 will have some form of a Holy Grail? It's one of the things that I enjoy pursuing at D2R, and it always surprises me that other ARPGs do not have this. Well, I think it depends largely on the itemization, because legendary items will have all different varying roles of affixes, so it's difficult to like Holy Grail something when it can have different roles, sort of similar to rare items in Diablo 2 Resurrected. But with that being said, Diablo 4 has unique items which are ultra rare endgame chase items that the devs said most players typically will only find like 1 or 2 per season. So because those have static roles and they're the same across the board, you could, in theory, do a Holy Grail of Diablo 4 just based on all the endgame chase items or the endgame unique chase items of Diablo 4. So yes, I do think it's possible. And for those that like doing the Grail in Diablo 2 Resurrected, you will definitely be able to do it in Diablo 4. The next question is from Andre. His question is, what character will you pick for the inevitable PvP match against Coooley? The entire Diablo 2 community is waiting this epic battle. Probably going to be a Suicide Branch, Crown of Ages, 163 FCR, 99 FHR Wind Druid. Might have to change out the helmet depending on, I guess, what character Coooley's rocking. But yeah, Wind Druid just seemed like a good all-around choice. Don't know too much about PvP, but I do plan on introducing some more like community-based content with Coooley. I've had a ton of people request things like video reactions and one-on-ones and whatever, so I do have some secret content planned coming in the future with Coooley, but yeah, for this question it will be the Wind Druid for sure. The final question for today's video is from the Hoglin, but before we take a look at it, I just want to segue to today's sponsor, Hero Wars. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Here's a question for you. Where can you get 30,000 coins, 600 emeralds, and 5 awesome heroes to start dominating in Hero Wars right away? Too slow? The answer is the link in the description below. Play Hero Wars now. The Hoglin's question is, hey DB, I know the Druid is your favorite character. Do you think that most people underestimate him overall? Why do you think the Druid is the best? Well, the Druid is like the jack of all trades but master of none. You can do summoning, you can do caster builds, you can do melee builds, but probably not the best in any one of those scenarios, other than like maybe like best possible gear Fire Druid starts to compare to some other casters. Maybe like best possible gear Fury Druid is similar to a Smiter for Ubers, but it requires very expensive gear. So I think that's why a lot of people underestimate him overall. It's just because it's very expensive to get sort of the same result that you can with a cheaper variant. But yeah, I don't think the Druid is the best in any single scenario, but it's definitely one of the few characters that can pretty much do anything in the game. So I think that's probably why the Druid is my favorite character. So that wraps up today's video, guys. Thank you so much for all the interesting questions. Again, if you'd like to have your question featured in next month's installment, let me know in the comment section below this video. With that being said, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, if you could throw a like on this video, that'd be awesome. I'll catch you guys on my next video or live stream. Peace out.
To the